I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is not leaving too early. It's staying too long. And that applies to relationships, jobs, events. A lot of the times we feel this pressure to make things work because that's what's comfortable. And as humans, we lean towards what's comfortable for us and what is familiar. And we want to make those things work, right? Because we've already invested so much time, we've already invested so much effort into whatever we're in, whether it's a job, a relationship, or an event, or family members, that we lose sight of the fact that things become unhealthy for us, or simply that we've outgrown them. One of the big things that I am particularly bad about is we confuse hope as evidence. So rather than taking things as they are and allowing people to... We can't squeak that during the show, please. Okay. Allowing people to show you who they are, we believe something different. And a lot of the times we see that as potential in people, or we see them for who they could be instead of who they are showing us that they are. This recently was very difficult for me as I was switching jobs. I had been praying for months and months and months, almost a year now, to get a new opportunity. And reason for that is I wasn't being valued at what I thought my market value was at my current position. And recently, as I was putting in my 2 weeks, they were giving me my flowers, giving me tons of compliments. And it got me, like emotionally, it got me. And I was like, dang, am I making the right decision? Am I making the wrong decision? What should I be doing here? And I gave that like little inkling of hope, that little hope that they would do better, that little hope that they saw value in me, started to get into the way of the clarity that they had already shown me, that they don't value me. And it took me having to leave for them to understand that. And so rather than accepting a counteroffer or even entering into counter discussions, I was able to walk away because I'm starting to, in my life, understand that what I hope in my mind and the potential that I see, whether it's in a job, in a person, or in anything in my life, it's not its potential, right? Yes, there are people and opportunities that have potential, but if collectively there is not a collaboration to reach that potential, then we need to stop taking hope as evidence. And with that, that doesn't mean that everybody should be given up on immediately. But how long are we willing to accept potential and look at potential as a reason to continue pursuing something? How long do we take credit? How long do we give them credit for their potential without holding them accountable for their actions? This is relevant to a relationship or a job. As I just mentioned, I had asked them several times in my position to value me and to actually see me as somebody that was driving revenue and driving potential. And every time I had those conversations, it was immediately shut down. So even though my time at my previous company had a ton of potential, at what point did I have to look at that and say, no, I have to draw the line. I have to hold you guys accountable, because even though there's potential here, that doesn't mean there's a future for me here. And if we aren't working towards this as a collaborative, then it's not worth my time. Now, the investment piece of it. I am horrible about this. If I've invested a lot of time, effort, money into something, it is very, very difficult for me to walk away. And I look at it as, holy crap, I've invested 3 years into this or 2.5 years into this. Like, if I walk away now, all of those years are wasted. But a lot of the times, things that we don't look at is, okay, if I'm saying that if I walk away from this, I've wasted 3 years of my time on this person. Let's say it in a relationship. For example, I was just in a 2.5 year situationship. And if I'm looking at it as I've wasted my time for 2.5 years, which I did, so I want to make this work, then that leads to me wasting another year. So then when I'm 3.5 years into it, I'm sitting there looking, okay, I've wasted 3.5 years. I've spent this amount of money. I've spent this amount of time. I've rejected these people for this situationship. So I'm going to make it work. And then it continues to lose investment and lose its value because you're just continuing to waste whatever you invested. The things that you're investing time and time and time again are continuing to be wasted. The fact that this is time for you to walk away does not change. The fact that this is not healthy for you, this is not right for you, does not change. It is simply the fact that I am terrible about saying I wasted 2.5 years. I've spent all this time with somebody. I don't want to start over. But really, it's sunk cost. At some point, I'm going to have to walk away. And this is something that I usually use as an excuse a lot of the times. Recently, since my situationship ended, I have not talked to anybody because I'm still dealing with the fact that, like, I invested 2.5 years and that was a lot of time and I still made the wrong choice. So now I have to really evaluate my next choice because I'm tired of wasting all of my time. I am sitting here on a podcast telling you that we need to stop staying too long and wasting our time and just understand the sunk cost into things. And in full transparency, this is my biggest flaw. And it's my biggest flaw when it comes to relationships, when it comes to friendships, when it comes to work. I am absolutely terrible about staying too long or allowing people too much access to me for too long, to the point that it starts to hurt me. And not hurt me like just in an emotional sense, but hurt me in a financial sense, in a spiritual sense, in all of these different aspects of my life as I keep these things that are not supposed to be there. It's like seeing a little bit of mold on your wall and not dealing with it and just saying, well, you know, it took a long time for this to grow, so it's going to take a while for it to spread. And that's not the case. Like, once there is rot, it rots everything. And I am terrible with this concept, actually. And I think another thing along these lines is, because we're so used to it and because we've invested so much into it, we look at that as like defining our happiness or just bringing us joy. And that's not always the case. It might just be familiar, right? If as humans, we are adverse to change. If something feels familiar, it feels comfortable. It feels like it brings us joy. And that's not how life is supposed to be. We're supposed to embrace change and move forward, but we're terrible at it. And quite frankly, I really struggle with this in relationships because I hate starting over. Like, what do you mean you want to hear about my childhood trauma? Like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to tell you about this. I don't want to kiss this guy or go on this awkward first date. So I'll just go back to what made me happy, but that's not what makes me happy. It really is just what's familiar, because if I was happy, I wouldn't be in this uncomfortable, unpeaceful place. And a lot of the times we look at what's familiar because we don't want to challenge ourselves. And I'm terrible about this, but we want to stay in that familiarity because it's easier for us. And if you're adverse to change or adverse to challenge, it's really difficult to understand when to walk away because you're so focused on what's familiar and the fear of walking away. So that leads to us staying too long because we're just scared. In full transparency, I'm scared of being in another relationship and getting hurt by somebody else or wasting my time again. I'm scared of going to a job that's less stable and I have to reestablish myself. I'm scared of finding new friends because there are some whack jobs out there. Trust me, I've met a few of them on Bumble BFF. Change is scary and it leads to us sitting in what makes us happy, which doesn't really make us happy. It's just familiar. A lot of the times that same familiarity has also started to define us. Specifically, so for example, in my career, I am currently in a partnerships role. And me being the head of partnerships, leading partnerships for the company that I'm at, has become part of my identity, right? You start to define what your career will look like when you're the VP of partnerships and imagine what it'll look like when you're speaking at this event or doing this. And same thing in a relationship. For example, like in my last situationship, yes, we were not dating, we were non-exclusive, but I started to imagine 5 years from now what it looked like to be with this person. Like, this is the person I want to marry. Like, I want to be with this person. And when you start to do that, it becomes part of your identity. So walking away from those things, it almost creates an identity crisis because you're walking away from something you were starting to define yourself by. So now going to a new job, I'm no longer in partnerships. I'm now in sales. So somebody that I thought I was becoming and that I was going to become an industry leader in this, now I'm having to change. I'm now going to be an industry leader in sales, and changing that mindset and changing that defining factor of myself that I had built is really difficult to walk away from. Same thing when you build a life with somebody in your head and now you're staying in a relationship because that's what you've defined. You've started to identify with this future that you've built in your head or that you guys have talked about. And this is something I'm terrible about. And so now it's difficult to turn that off and envision a future with somebody else or even be open to it. A lot of people, me and my therapist recently talked about this, but a lot of people, after a few tough relationships, they are not open to any more. Like, they're not open to meeting new people. They're not open to any other ideas than the fact that one of these other people is going to come back into their life. And it makes it very difficult to walk away, which is why we stay in situations for too long. When you create this identity and this kind of fantasy of where you're going with these things, whether it's the job, whether it's the person, when you walk away from that, it feels like you're quitting or that you failed, you couldn't make it work. I am not a quitter, and I do not take lightly at all to failure. I personally am adverse to failure, so it is really, really difficult for me to give up on something. Recently, I hate talking about this because I really hope he does not see these, but recently my situationship, I reached out to him, and it's been like 3 months, 4 months since we talked, but I reached out to him just because, like, I just can't lose. I can't lose. I can't, like, give up. It sucks that, like, all of the love and effort and time and money that I put into building this person up and building a connection with this person didn't work. Like, how does it not work? I put so much into it. And it starts to become almost like an insecurity of, wow, I failed. And not like in a failures like this, specifically in relationships, they are increasingly difficult because the failure doesn't come down to, oh, I could have worded this better, or I could have done better in my career, or invested more time in this. It truly, when these things come to an end, it feels like the failure is you as a person. And so it creates insecurity around, could I have loved more? Could I have looked better? Could I have taken care of this more, or made more money here, or spent more time doing this? Or what did I do that wasn't enough for them to make it work? And a lot of the times it comes down to then trying to continue to prove yourself to this person. And that's then creates this toxic cycle of staying too long and going back to each other and spinning the block. I am a spin the block queen. That becomes really unhealthy. And then it creates a cycle of almost waiting for permission to walk away. When am I going to have the huge fight or get blocked or deal with something that is unforgivable, betrayal? Or when am I going to get laid off so that I can have permission to walk away from what's clearly not working for me? And a lot of the times we're waiting for this to happen. And to be honest, closure is overrated. We're never going to get that. We're never going to be told when to walk away. We have to make that decision. And it's a difficult one. A lot of times we want to stay, we want to make things work because of everything that we've invested. But sometimes we don't get the permission. We just have to decide. And sometimes we do get permission. For example, with my ex, there was a fight that was no coming back from it. Like, it was end all be all. We have not said a word to each other since we fought that night. And honestly, it made things easier. Should we have walked away from each other way before that? Absolutely. But there was a fight one night and there was no coming back. And that was the permission to walk away that we both needed. And thank God that it did happen, just because I wouldn't be in my, like, where I'm at in life. Like, I wouldn't even be in Florida if I was still dealing with him. And there's certain times where we get the permission. There's certain times where we don't. When you're walking away from something, there's literally never a perfect time to do it. Literally never. It's not going to be next week, next month, after season, before their football season. Oh, wow, that one was pointed. Before their season, after their season, before you get this next job, after you get the job, next year, next quarter, whatever it may be, there's never going to be a perfect time to walk away. And even if there was a perfect time to walk away, usually we make an excuse to stay longer. Usually there's just one other thing that comes up that, oh, maybe I'll stay for this. And it really brings out that we don't want to walk away because it's painful. It's painful to walk away, and we don't want to do that. Which leads to us staying time and time and time again. And I am a true believer that even when we walk away from things, if something is meant for you, if something is destined for you, and God wants you to have something, someone, whatever it is, that there's nothing you can do to stop that blessing from coming to you. And so, all that being said, we should be walking away when things are unhealthy, when we're unhappy, because if it is truly meant for you, like, God will give that back to you. I've realized that every single major decision in my life was terrifying before I made the decision. I would be gutted even thinking about making the decision. And quite frankly, every single time it was the right decision. It was the right time to walk away. And looking back, I usually knew exactly what I needed to do long before I did it. I knew when to walk away from friends, exes, situationships, jobs, family before I ever did. long before I ever did. And what it comes down to is we struggle with staying too long. I don't know a time that I left too early or was too antsy to walk away from something that I truly believed in. And more times than not, I was overstaying my welcome in that chapter of my life.